was born October 16, 1981, in Oregon. She was a 28-year-old wife and mother of two who was known for being an incredibly loving, fun, friendly, and warm person. She was married to Joshua Powell, who was born January 20th, 1976. Susan and Josh officially met while attending the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the LDS Church. Now, even though that was the time that they officially met, it was not the first time that they had come across one another. Susan and Joshua were 6 years apart in age, and the first time that they came across one another was at a friend's house when Joshua was 18 and Susan was 12. Susan remembered Joshua because he played piano. It was said that Joshua admitted that when seeing her for the first time at the age of 12, he thought she was beautiful and that it was too bad that she was too young for him at the time. But Susan thought that their reconnection years later at the age of 19 was what sealed the fact that they were meant to be. The pair eventually started dating, but wasted no time making it official. Susan and Joshua were married April 2001, Portland, Oregon Temple. 4 years later, they had their first son, Charles, born in 2005, and 1 year after that, their son Braden was born. The family on the outside looked like they were the definition of happy, but there was way more going on within the family, behind closed doors, that would unfortunately come to light in a tragic manner. What Susan was not aware of when she married her husband was there was a lot more to him than most people knew. He had a different side to him that started to bring a strain on their relationship. Joshua had a history of being possessive and controlling within his relationships. Kathleen Terry, a woman that Joshua dated prior to being with Susan, confirmed that Joshua had a possessive nature, especially when it came to his relationships. While dating Joshua, she mentioned that he tried to put restrictions on her when it came to her family, and whenever she tried to be around some of her loved ones, he had to be in attendance as well. It was clear that Susan ignored any red flags that could have been in front of her based off how much she actually loved Joshua. But even in their new house, tension was still very high between the couple due to Joshua still being up to his very controlling ways when it came to Susan. After a certain period of time, Susan started to become very, very concerned about the safety of herself and of her two sons. She decided to start documenting everything that was going on in her life at the time in a diary. In July of 2008, Susan recorded a video of her walking around her house, documenting all of her assets. She stated that the reason why she wanted to do this was she wanted for all of her things to be documented if something ever happened to her or her family. On December 6, 2009, Susan took her two sons, Braden and Charlie, to their local ward, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, around 12 p.m., as normal. Later that afternoon, when they came back home, one of Susan's neighbors came to visit her and left around 5 p.m. That was said to be the last time that anyone saw Susan Cox Powell alive. The next day, December 7, 2009, Susan was scheduled to take Braden and Charlie to a daycare center. The daycare center became concerned after a while when no one ever showed up or tried to reach out to let them know that they wouldn't be coming. So they decided to contact Josh's sister, which was their emergency contact for the kids. When contacted and told that Susan and the boys never showed up to daycare, she decided to go to the house to find out what was going on or to see if anything was wrong. When reaching the house, she knocked on the door several times, but no one answered. She became concerned and decided to contact the police. When the police arrived, they made the decision to go ahead and break in the house. When entering the house, the only thing that they found was Susan's purse and phone, but no one was home. But there were things that were even more strange than just finding Susan's phone and bag. They also noticed that there were two huge box fans that were pointed towards the carpet, they realized that the carpet had just been cleaned, and it appeared as if the box fans were supposed to be drying the carpet as quickly as possible. That raised concern and confusion with not just the police, but also Josh's sister. Eventually, Joshua showed up to the house, and the police and his sister were relieved to find out that both Braden and Charlie were with him the whole time. When asked, did he know where Susan was, he said that he had no idea. Why? Because him and his sons had just come from a spontaneous camping trip at Simpson Springs camping ground. He stated that he made that decision out of nowhere to take the boys on a camping trip, which wouldn't have raised concern, but he decided to make this decision out of nowhere, and they left for the camping trip at 12 midnight in freezing cold weather. When it was realized that this was a missing persons case that they were now dealing with, everybody was concerned that actually knew. It was left up to Joshua to contact Susan's family to let them know what was happening, but he was in no hurry to actually contact them. It took Joshua 2 days to finally contact Susan's family. When the case became public and reporters started speaking with Joshua, he seemed to have a different attitude towards all of this. He was not as emotionally concerned. Reporters were interviewing neighbors and the people who knew the couple, and everyone said that they thought that Joshua's actions were very strange, being that he came off as so unconcerned about where his wife was. But the police had absolutely no evidence to actually pursue the idea of Joshua having something to do with it, and he remained only a person of interest. The only individuals that were doing major things to try to keep Susan's name relevant was her own family. They would stand in certain public places with large signs of her picture and also stating above her picture, "Remember me." During one of their regular rallies to try to keep Susan's name in the spotlight, an argument ensued between Chuck Cox, which was Susan's father, and Susan Powell when he showed up out of nowhere with a camera crew. Stephen made the argument that the Cox family were harassing his family and also spreading nasty rumors around town in their area, and that the Cox family's effort was not actually helping, but becoming more damaging to the case. But things became even more crazy when Joshua showed up to the site during the argument with a completely different attitude than what many had seen of him during that entire time. Joshua became emotional and was crying, stating that the Cox family was using his 2 sons as a pawn to the media to try to change the narrative of what was really going on. After over a year of Joshua being of no assistance to the police and stating over and over again that he had no idea what could have possibly happened to Susan, he eventually started alluding to the idea that Susan was cheating on him with a journalist named Stephen Kocher, who actually went missing himself a few days after Susan. The only problem is, Kocher went missing in Las Vegas and had no connection to Susan in any way possible. But even after that claim was dismissed, the claims didn't stop coming from the Powell family. Susan Powell, Joshua's father, claimed that Susan at one point would make sexual advances towards him. He said that Susan would do or say certain things that would give her reason to be close to him or give him reason to touch her. But the police would soon discover that Stephen's claims were not exactly how things were. The police started growing very, very suspicious of Susan Powell, so they decided to get a search warrant to search his home. And when doing so, they found way more than they ever expected. They collected several different boxes of pictures of Susan where it was very clear that Susan was unaware that she was being photographed, and some of them were close-up shots of some of her body parts. Stephen became infatuated with Susan, so much to the point to where he started recording videos of him professing his love for Susan. The videos were very disturbing. It showed him in his day-to-day life Speaking of how much he loved Susan, the fact that he followed Susan around in her day-to-day life, Stephen would also collect items of clothing and would store them in a specific hiding place and would use these items of clothing for his own personal satisfaction. Afterwards, Susan Powell was arrested for voyeurism, which is watching someone without them knowing. The authorities started to realize that there was way more to the story involving the Powell family than they had realized. Soon after, Braden and Charlie were taken out of the custody of Joshua and put into foster care. There was growing concern for the two sons, especially being that there was a point where one of the sons mentioned that he remembered being in the car with his parents, both of his parents getting out of the car, but his father being the only one that returned. And when asked, "Where was Mommy?" he stated, "In the trunk." Eventually, a judge granted custody to Susan's parents and stated that the only way that Joshua would be able to have visitations with the sons is if he moved out of Stephen Powell's home. Joshua eventually moved to Graham, Washington. The visitation process started in a secured facility, but eventually a decision was made for Joshua to have in-home supervised visits. The supervised visits were being supervised by caseworker Elizabeth Hall, who over time grew very, very fond of the boys and had her own personal relationship with them, stating that they were very, very sweet and happy boys for the most part. In February 2012, Joshua had a court case that was supposed to be the first process of him trying to get his sons back. But after a discovery of disturbing actions that were found out about Joshua, that was in the evidence of things that were taken from the Powell's possession, the judge decided that it was best for the time being that the children remain with their grandparents as there was further investigation on Joshua. This was terrible news to Joshua, and he didn't take it well. Joshua's actions grew very, very concerning after that trial. He started to do very strange things that started giving investigators an idea that there was something that he had planned. Things such as donating all of his kids' toys away, and also withdrawing a large amount of money from his bank. But things were way worse than anyone could ever imagine. February 5th, 2012, Elizabeth, who supervised the visits between Joshua and his sons, picked up the two boys from the grandparents' house and took them to Joshua's house. When arriving to Joshua's home, the boys got out of the car and ran to their father's front door. Joshua opened the door, and as Elizabeth was getting out of the car and trying to get all of her things together to go into the house herself, Joshua gave her a strange look, brought the boys inside, and slammed the door, locking her out. Elizabeth immediately rushed to the door, screaming out to Joshua, demanding for him to let her in, but he wasn't responding to her. She continued to bang, and eventually she started hearing one of the boys crying out for help. Unbeknownst to her, Joshua had begun attacking his own two sons with a hatchet. Soon after, Elizabeth was continuously banging and also on the phone with 911 to try to get someone to assist her in getting into the home and getting the boys to safety. She started smelling gasoline. Soon after this, the house exploded, sending the entire house into flames, with Joshua, Braden, and Charlie still inside. Eventually, the fire department reached the home, but unfortunately it was too late. The three lives of Joshua, Braden, and Charlie were all gone. Their bodies were found in the home when the fire was finally put out. The devastating tragedy sent shockwaves through the neighborhood and through the nation. The families were devastated. Although people had concern pertaining to Joshua and his interaction with his children, it was still shocking to see that he actually took the lives of not just himself, but the two children that he claimed to love so much. Soon after, there was a discovery that right before Elizabeth reached the home with the two sons, There was a letter that was sent to the family and also a voicemail that was left to the family members of the Powell family. In the audio, Joshua stated that he could not live without his children. He was sorry for everyone that he hurt, and goodbye. Now, many years after the murder and suicide of Joshua, Charlie, and Braden, it was still never declared what happened to Susan. Her case was still a missing persons case. Thank you for joining me once again for another Mystery Attic video. And as always, stay weird. Normal's overrated.